Well, a nice change of pace in a single character-based episode gives us one of the best episodes of Fear the Walking Dead yet. Hey guys, Cameron for the mid-season premiere of Fear the Walking Dead Season 2, Episode 8, Grotesque, and I'm not gonna lie, I honestly forgot this was premiering. If I wouldn't have remembered, I would have forgotten that tonight was the night that Fear the Walking Dead came on, and honestly, I don't really think many people know as well. Why? Because this show is not nearly as popular as The Walking Dead is. Now, that's not to say people don't watch it, it does definitely have an audience. Obviously, it's gained its Season 2, and I'm pretty sure it's getting, I think it has a Season 3, I don't know if it's been renewed, but it's probably going to be renewed very soon. But either way, the show isn't nearly as popular, and it hasn't nearly gained the success that The Walking Dead has, and that's understandable. Why? Because the show hasn't had nearly enough episodes for us to like this show, and that's really, I think, been the problem with this series so far, is that it's you know, had tremendous potential, but it just hasn't really delivered. It's focused too much on theatrics and effects rather than things that do matter. And this episode, I thought was really great. And like I said, I think it's probably one of the best episodes the show's done so far. Why? Because apart from a few really dumb scenes, it was mainly completely character-based. And that's something I really do love. And was this episode perfect? No. I think there are still some character beats that don't exactly work, which I'll get into. But I think overall, it's one of the best episodes. And it's a great contrast to The Walking Dead. When they try to do single character-based episodes, they're usually very boring and very dull. Why? Because we don't really need them, because we already know all we need to know about the character. However, Fear the Walking Dead, I think, is really going to benefit from this, because we don't know a ton about these characters aside from a couple of bits of information that we were thrown in Season 1 and Season 2. And they're not really stuff that is resonating with us. And I think this episode did a really good job in developing this character of Nick, because a lot of people have said this character's been very off-kilter, and I think we're starting to see where his motivation currently is by the end of this episode, which I definitely really did like. But let's get into this episode, because like I said, I really liked it overall. And I have to say, the actor that plays Nick, I can't think of his name, he's very talented, I have to say. He's very talented. I think he did a very good job. Because actually, for most of this episode, he doesn't have much dialogue, except for a couple flashback scenes and some scenes where he needs to talk. But a lot of this episode is him on his own, kind of like Castaway. And I thought that was actually very impressive, and I think they did that really well, I have to say. So, let's get into it, though. And we start off with Nick. He wakes up on this mattress beneath a cross. His clothes are covered in blood, and he's laying beside two dead bodies. And we see this new character. We don't know her name, but she's saying how they were close friends, and she saw them a few days ago. She opens the curtains, and Nick gets up to see a young boy outside playing with a soccer ball. He asks where they are going. The woman tells Nick that she's going to find the boy's father, and Nick asks about the others too. She tells him that they will search for sanctuary. She asks if he will follow them. She warns him that if he is to head north, the roads are filled with enemies. And of course, she's talking about walkers, but this is a good thing for Nick, because as we know, he's kind of started to blend in with the walkers. In fact, he kind of wants to be a walker himself, and she says that she would like to go with him, but she needs to take care of the orphans. And outside, the woman hands Nick a few supplies and sends him on his way. Now, I was a little bit disappointed, because I was thinking we were going to get set up to this character, but we only know a few things about her. You know, she's there to give him information, and he embraces the young boy happily before wishing them luck on their journey. And he steps back inside, he looks at the bodies before heading off through mountain and a desert. He's covered in zombie blood. He sees a sign indicating that Tijuana is 100 miles away, and basically is going out on his own. And we kind of do see why, I think, because a lot of this episode, I think, is Nick rediscovering himself and things like that. But I think in that short few minutes, we kind of do get the sense why he is becoming a walker and why he does want to do this. Mainly, I think, so he can survive, because as we know, if you're covered in walker blood, they think you're dead. That's how it works, and I think it's interesting that we've seen that, but that's always been an aspect of the show. And Fear the Walking Dead hasn't really benefited on that a lot, but I think Nick is someone that does kind of know how to survive, and I think that this episode reminds us that he was one of the first people to learn about these walkers, and I really did like seeing that. Like I said, the only thing with this episode, I think, is a few things. I mean, it just didn't really seem like this was the exact direction for Nick to go in, but I think it does make sense, at least makes sense by the end of this episode. Like, we at least can get behind why he's doing that. So eventually, Nick comes across a couple of wrecked cars, but he just keeps on walking because he doesn't really know where he's going. He's kind of going out on his own, and then we get to what almost was my favorite aspect of this episode. I think the main problem with this episode are the flashbacks. Why? Because they had amazing potential. I really thought what they were going to do in those flashbacks is show us how Nick became the mess he is today. As we know, Nick is someone who he's been in drugs, he's been, freaking out about walkers, and for the past 3 or 4 episodes, he has had a completely broken character arc where he does one thing in one episode where he's killing walkers, and the next second he's trying to, cover himself in walker blood. It just didn't really go together. So I really thought, okay, this is the chance for us to really start to develop him, and at first I think they did a great job. We see he has a thumb war with the girl that we saw in the first scene, Gloria. We actually see a lot of Gloria in this episode, and I like seeing that because Gloria is the person that made him like this. She turned into a walker, as we know, and she wants him to lie about his parents so he can avoid jail. Now, we don't know what Nick did, but she tries to get him to talk badly about his parents, but he refused at first, and eventually, though, he starts complaining, and he says, there are things that he would say, but there aren't really things he can change, because his father's tired all the time, and here's where we get to the problem with the flashbacks, and that is, while they're interesting, they are of very little importance to what's going on in the main story, and I feel like there's a rule when you do these kind of flashbacks in episodes like this. You can do flashbacks, that's fine and all, but they have to connect to your main arc, and here, this is not at all connecting to Nick, it is not at all developing his character, and that's really the problem here. We just needed, I think, a couple more flashbacks to see him, to really see the pain that Nick has endured and what he's gone through, because we do get some really good stuff in these flashbacks, but like I said, they are of very little importance to this episode, and I think that really is the main problem here. They tried to, but it just didn't really work. So we then see Nick. He continues his trek as the sun sets. He finds an abandoned house and he investigates inside, and night falls and he's asleep, and a woman then finds him with a baseball bat, starts yelling at him in Spanish, and he tries to leave, grabs his bag first, but she strikes him repetitively, and he ends up leaving without the bag, and we don't know why he got this is something that I didn't really understand, why he just let go of his bag. Maybe, I don't know. I think he mainly did it so he can make himself look more like a walker, just so he could survive, because I think that's really what Nick's trying to do. He's trying to survive, which was interesting to watch. But the next day, he continues down another street. He's obviously in a bit of pain, because, she just beat him up and everything, and struck him repetitively. So he comes across abandoned cars, and he finds this walker buckled in the driver's seat reaching for him. He touches his fingertips before taking some water from the floor, and you can tell that he's been walking for a while because he really desperately needs water. He really desperately needs all this stuff. But this is another problem in the episode, that we don't really get to see him suffering a ton. We kind of just see him. It's some of the tone's a bit meandering, as you can tell, and he touches his fingertips before taking some water from the floor. He reaches for the radio in her car as the walker's teeth smash together in efforts to bite Nick, and he gets it nonetheless, and he tries to find a signal, but a few men approach in a jeep. They use a bayonet to put down a not-so-distant walker, and this is where things get interesting, because this is where we get to the aspect of more people knowing that these walkers exist, and the more people know that these walkers exist, the more people are going to know that they need to do something about these walkers, and I like that we're starting to see that there are people that are killing these walkers, and that's something that Walking Dead hasn't really touched upon. I mean, we've obviously seen them protect themselves from the walkers, but these are groups that straight up just kill walkers, and, these are characters that don't exactly know what to do in this situation, so Nick hides watching the men approach a man in his car asking for water. They kill him and laugh, and Nick's radio starts to make noise, so he takes off, and the men shoot at him, because of course they think he's a walker, which, again, this is real. He's done this to himself, I have to say. I mean, I can't really, say that this is bad. This is a bad situation for Nick, obviously, but he did this to himself by covering himself in walker blood, and he runs into the woods nearby. He eventually finds a very vast field. He stumbles through it alone, and he's trying to catch his breath as the sun beats down him. Very well done scene, let me just say. I thought there was some really good intense stuff here, and he steps on this cactus, which prompts him to realize that there's water inside of it, and he cracks it in half, but nothing comes out, so he crushes it a bit and gets some. It makes him sick, though, we see, and he actually, it gets to the point where he ends up having to drink his own urine, which is really weird to watch, but again, you have to understand that he's all on his own, and I think that aspect of this episode is really what makes it one of the best episodes, because we see him, he's clearly struggling, he's clearly doesn't have much, and he has to do whatever he can to survive, and of course, to get himself away from the walkers, he has to pretend to be a a walker, but he also can't really talk that much because that will expose himself and then the walkers will come after him. So if he pretends to be a walker and doesn't do anything, then that will help him. Again, it doesn't exactly make sense considering the narrative he had a couple episodes ago, but like I said, I think they did make sense of it in this episode, and I did like the way that was done. So then we see pre-apocalypse Nick and Gloria. They sit in a police station, and Madison walks in, and a woman who's the only other main character we've seen this episode, may I just add, and a woman cuts Nick off on his way to her and tells him that they'll meet privately, and we don't know why Madison's there or what her reasoning is, but we obviously know that there's something going on with her. We just don't really know what it is right now. And the first thing Nick asks about is his father, because he wants to know what happened, and she tells him that he isn't coming, adding that he was in an accident on his way home. He died in a head-on collision, and Nick obviously does not take this news to heart. I mean, he's obviously very crushed about this. Gloria hears Nick yells from the hallway, goes to see what happens, and this I'm like, okay, finally we know what happened to their father, because we knew they obviously had a father. We never heard about him, though. Well, this makes sense, because this is the thing that changed the Clark family forever. I mean, obviously after this, their life was never the same. This is how Travis came into their life. We know how they feel about Travis, as much as they think of him as their father. He's not really their father, and they don't really see him as their father, which is something that I've always thought was interesting about Travis's character, despite how kind of plain Travis can be at points. But I did like this. I did like what they tried to develop here. This was a good development for Nick. The problem is, like I said, there's a lot of, telling and not showing. We hear his screams. We don't actually see him. We don't actually see the pain he's in. We don't see how Nick deals with this, and we don't really see what came of this. And that's really the problem here, is that, again, they had a really good idea with putting these flashbacks in, trying to develop Nick's character a little bit further, but it just doesn't really do much when it's just him, getting upset about it. I need to see the development. I need to see what the point of this was. What was the point in Nick's life that made him a drug dealer? What was the point of his life that made him this way? We don't get to see, not a drug dealer, but the point that made him, a junkie. We don't get to see this stuff. This is stuff I wanted to see. I really want them to develop a Nick's character and show the pain he's going through in contrast to the pain he's going through now. Kind of make his character come full circle, and I think they did attempt to do that, so I'm not going to really fault them on that, because I think they tried, but they just didn't really succeed, and it's mainly because, like I said, this arc doesn't really go together, and I think that's something that they might have realized when doing this episode, but I think they would have benefited at least from just one or two more flashbacks. There is one more flashback, which we'll get into, but again, it just doesn't really do much. So then we see, after this, so I did think this was a good scene, and definitely one of the best scenes of the episode, I have to say. I thought it was a very well done scene. I think, like I said, they attempted to do something. It just didn't really work in retrospect to what was going on in the present, which I found to be a lot more interesting than the flashbacks. So the flashbacks were fine, but again, they just didn't really, they ended up being not much of importance to Nick's character or to the story going on at present. So Nick then wakes up to a couple of rabid dogs barking at him. One starts biting his leg, and he used a rock to fight it off. Again, very well done scene, because again, you get the sense that he's doing whatever he can to survive. The other latches on to him. He tries to climb on top of an abandoned van. It loses its grip, but the damage is already done to Nick's leg, and the barking stops. The horde of walkers approach, and I'm talking like a massive amount. The dog starts to attack the walkers, and they take down a couple, but ultimately serve as a distraction to the walkers getting devoured, and that was a crazy scene. So they end up getting eaten, obviously, and later Nick moves around on top of the van, causing it to make noise and attract the walkers, and again, he's trying to make himself look like a walker, and I think he did a good job, and just as they close in, Nick resorts to prayer. A horn sounds, attracts the walkers in other directions. Gun then shots ring out in the distance. Nick jumps from the van and stumbles over to the dog for something to eat, just like the walkers. I'm not gonna lie, while I thought this was an intense scene, I thought it was a bit silly too, because you're telling me that these trained professional guys could not shoot Nick. I mean, I understand that obviously Nick's the main character, but I just want him to suffer a little bit more. I really did. I think it just would have added to his character arc a little bit, and I think they should have just made him suffer a little bit more. So one walker makes its way back to him, but he gets on top of it, takes its belt, only to hustle off and walk with the horde. He starts to become delusional on the walk. He hears voices. A walker on his right tells him to come with me, I'll take you home. He looks to her again in disbelief, but she's gone, and I'm thinking that that was supposed to be Gloria, is what he was thinking, that he obviously misses that time with Gloria. Gloria was someone that helped him through all this, and I do think that's something that the flashbacks did well, is it did show that Gloria was someone that just let him vent and gave him someone to talk to, and he really doesn't have someone like that now. You know, his entire family doesn't understand him. Ophelia kind of does. They were kind of getting close, but Ophelia hasn't gone through nearly the struggle that Nick does, and I think Strand as well. Strand, obviously, he kind of trusts him, but at the same time, he always thinks that Strand has ulterior motives. So in that sense, I think they did that pretty well. That's an example of something that I think they did well with the flashbacks, to show that he really doesn't have that person that he can really talk to anymore, and Gloria was said person, and now he doesn't really have that. So a sign indicates that the horde is 400 miles from Chihuahua, and Nick sees the Jeep approaching its horn, and it stops about 100 feet ahead of the horde. The men get out to gun down the walkers. Nick doesn't flinch as the undead are gunned down around him, because again, he has to try to be a walker, and he's not scared because he kind of, understands the walkers. And I think the reason that he understands the walkers, and I think something they did do well, is show at least why he's not really harmed by the walkers, and that's because just like him, they're all kind of just going through life, trying to find a purpose, trying to find out, where to go, because right now, again, walkers aren't the mass population. This is still when the apocalypse is just starting, and it's definitely starting to get a lot more serious, but it's not to the extent of it is in The Walking Dead. And again, that's something I think they do very well in Fear, that they do differently than The Walking Dead, is that they get to showcase a lot of different locations that The Walking Dead couldn't do, such as the boat, such as, the houses. Those are stuff that The Walking Dead can't really show because of the state that that's in compared to what's going on here. So he stares at the men ahead of him, continues his approach. The man drops his bullets, gets distracted, eventually devoured. How this man was so incompetent of shooting, I have no idea. I honestly laughed when he was devoured because I thought he was very, very stupid the way that was done. How are you that incompetent, and you were professionally trained to do this? And along with his friends, they're also devoured, which I do have to say, much more graphic than I think they've ever been on this show. I think maybe the most graphic scene the show has given us, and I was just surprised, honestly. There was so much blood, so much going on there. I mean, one of the men escaped in a Jeep. Nick watches them get in just in time, like literally so close to getting in. If he would have done anything while they weren't eating the man, he wouldn't have been able to escape. He would have been among the men. And later, Nick and the horde continue on their path. A group of 3 watch from above, and this scene was a bit strange because they kind of approach it like we know them, and obviously we don't know them, which kind of makes me think that maybe we should have been developing these 3 characters and then go along with Nick, which is something that I think maybe the show could have, benefited from a little bit, and they debate helping him. Nick collapses, and we meet this new character, Luciana, who, despite the other 2 men saying, oh, look, he's dying, there's no reason to help him, she decides to help him, and she decides not to help him. She decides not to help him, but the other man want to, and we can see that, they don't really want to, but she kind of does. She wants to see, obviously, what state he's in and what's going on there, because obviously she thinks that maybe she should help him, and I thought that was interesting when we saw that. And Luciana, for me, I mean, she's a good character, but we just didn't really see much of her in this episode, so I can't really say if I like her character. And I know Chris Hardwick already thinks she's a badass, but I can't really say anything about her character because I haven't seen her yet. But I do like that now it's seeming like Luciana is trying to represent the Gloria in his life, someone who does want to help him, someone who is going to talk to him. I thought that they did pretty well. I definitely really did enjoy that, and that's something they did pretty well. But again, I don't think it was the main intent of the flashbacks. I think the main intent of the flashbacks were for us to see how far Nick has come, and they really didn't do that here. I don't really think it worked in the sense that they wanted to, and I think they could have done a lot better than they did, because then we get to the next flashback, which literally gives us nothing. It's Nick and Gloria. They're in bed reading a book. They're in the church where we first found Nick in season 1, and I guess we're to assume that this was the night that Gloria turned into a walker, and Gloria grabs some drugs, the 2 get ready for a high, and that's it. We don't see anything else. I don't know what the point of this was or why we saw this scene, but it served very little importance. There's no Nick suffering. There's no Nick telling Gloria anything. There's no purpose for this. I don't know what the reason was for this, and like I said, I think the thing they were trying to show is that Gloria is, I think the thing they showed well is that Gloria is that person that Nick needs in his life, and he doesn't have someone like that right now. But other than that, I don't know why they showed this. I honestly have no idea, and I don't really think that it was necessary at all to show what they did here. And like I said, that's really my main problem with the flashbacks. I think they started off pretty well, but then we had this random one, and I really wanted some more seeing Nick deal with his father dying. That would have been interesting to see, and all the interesting stuff they don't let us see, and that's something that kind of pissed me off here. You have this opportunity to show me some really good flashbacks when you have zero to almost no dialogue going on in an episode. This is your chance to show us stuff that we want to see with Nick's character, and we didn't really get to see that here, and I think in that respect they kind of failed. So Nick then lays in the street, rain's falling on him, he's happy because he's actually in a good place now. It's hot and sunny again, he's limping through a neighborhood, dogs are barking at him, he's found Luciana, and he heads into a drugstore, but it's been raided, so he struggles to find anything he can because clearly he's going through withdrawal, and that's something that they did very well, because we could obviously tell that Nick was suffering, we didn't really know why. I like that they showed that he's going through withdrawal. I mean, that's, I heard, one of the most painful things anyone can go through is is just knowing that you're going through withdrawal. It's very hard to go through, especially when you're someone like Nick, who clearly, I think, binge drugged a little bit. I think he definitely did do that. He probably did that to comfort himself with his father's death, and again, that's something that I really wish we saw, but we didn't, and he eventually finds some gauze to bandage himself up with, and while he's applying to it, Luciana and her two men walk in the doors with guns. They ask if it's a bite, and he explains that a dog bit him, not a walker, so obviously he's not going to turn into a walker. She offers him help, invites him with her, and I like that that was the reason that Luciana didn't want to help him. You know, Luciana is clearly someone that knows who's a walker and who's not, which is something I like. We actually have a smart character here, which I'm not saying that other characters weren't smart, but I don't really think we've had a character that's as experienced with walkers and knows really what's going on with walkers as someone like Luciana, and I do like seeing that. Strand was a smart guy, but he wasn't really in terms of walkers. I think Luciana, however, is, and Nick is then cared for by a well-kept man using gloves to keep his injury sterilized, and he cuts Nick's jeans with scissors. He uses some rubbing alcohol to clean the wound, and he tells Nick Luciana it said that he was brave, but says he is not brave, but foolish. He doesn't think he's brave, but he tells Nick that walking with the dead is really strange company. Nick tells the doctor that he wants to be where the dead aren't monsters, and I thought that was interesting that we saw that Nick said he doesn't want to be, he wants the, he kind of understands the walkers and he kind of sympathizes with them, but that's the part that's broken here. Why does he sympathize with the walkers? Why does he feel this way? We understand, obviously, why he was walking among them to survive, but the sympathizing stuff, I don't understand. I mean, they rip people to shreds. What's the point of that? I mean, I get the sense that obviously they're just trying to go through life, but it doesn't really justify this weird character, this weird character journey is going on where he suddenly sympathizes with the walkers. That's something I just don't understand. And the doctor opens the doors. Nick follows. He's a thriving community. He walks outside into it, past Luciana, observes the new world he has found. People are boxing, playing soccer. They're carrying purses. They're cooking, buying clothes, food, and market. The ball rolls to Nick. He kicks it back with a smile, basically realizing that he's actually safe. He's in this community of people that actually support him. He's maybe going to bond with some of these people. You know this isn't going to last long, but that's the way the episode ends. So that was a good, hopeful ending overall. I like the way that was done, and I think it's a good, like I said, direction for the show. So overall, this episode, like I said, it definitely was not perfect. It definitely had those flaws that it did in the sense of it had these flashbacks, but they just didn't really contribute to anything. I think something they did very well with Strand's character, and that's still, I think, the best episode the show has given us because of the fact that that really showed why Strand's character is the way he is. That showed why Strand was so mysterious. That showed what Strand was hiding, and it also showed why he really wanted to go to Mexico, because obviously he wanted to care for his dying boyfriend. And I think they showed that very well there. Nick, however, I think they attempted to do stuff, but there was a lot of stuff that's missing. Where's Nick grieving over his father's death? Where's Nick, obviously, going through drugs and things like that, in contrast to him going through withdrawal? That stuff I really would have wanted to see, and they didn't really get to show that there, because there's none of Madison barking at him to stop doing drugs. That was the part of the show that always annoyed me, was seeing that. But this, I thought, was interesting to watch, and I thought all the stuff that was in the present, I thought made a lot of sense. Again, the only thing that doesn't make sense is why does Nick sympathize with the walkers? And at this point, I feel like it's something they are going to try to reveal, and I think something that I am very impressed with, and something I do really like about this premiere, is that it really does seem like the show is a little bit more focused on character. They do want to develop these characters a little bit, and by splitting them into separate groups, that we can really start to bond with these characters more. There aren't as many people to talk to. There aren't as many people to see for these characters, and with them out on their their own, I think we're going to find out more about these characters that we didn't know before, and that's something that definitely makes me excited. As you guys know, I was definitely worried about this mid-season premiere because of the direction that this season was headed. I really thought it just got very random, but I think this premiere kind of saved it. It really does show that the show is trying to go in a more positive type, not positive type direction, that's not the word. It is trying to go in a more character-based show, and that's something I always thought about Fear the Walking Dead that The Walking Dead isn't. The Walking Dead is an action show. Fear the Walking Dead, I think, is more of a family drama, and I think that's something that they're really showing here. They're kind of showing the downfall of the family, this dysfunctional family trying to go about life, and I'm looking forward to seeing what next week's episode is going to be like, because I think next week's episode is going to focus on the Madison, Alicia, Strand, and Ophelia of it all, and I'm hoping that that has the amount of character development that this one does, because this really was, I think, the most character-based episode since the Strand episode, and I think that's something they do very well, are these single-type, character-based episodes. I'd like to see Fear the Walking Dead do more of these, because I think it works very well here. Also, can he really trust Luciana? I think he can. Obviously, she's the main character, and I like what we saw of her, that obviously she knows how to deal with walkers, and she definitely doesn't put up with nonsense. I mean, she's someone that was very tentative to help him, remember, and she really wasn't someone that wanted to bring him to this community, but what is this community like? Is it really going to survive? I don't see this community surviving beyond this season. I think they're probably going to be dead by the end of the season, but we'll have to see what happens there. I think that's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. And how is he going to get back to his family? I honestly don't know. I feel like this could be the norm for Nick for a while, where he's kind of just out on his own, which I think is interesting to watch. Oh, and is he going to get the drugs he needs? Because obviously, Nick is clearly someone that needs those drugs. He can't just go without withdrawal. He clearly needs them, and I think that's something they did show very well here. Overall, guys, the stuff in this episode that was great was truly great, and it's mainly because of how good the actor that played Nick was. I think he really, got me to get behind all that stuff that I wasn't so happy with, and did get me a little bit more on board. Yeah, there's some stuff that just doesn't click as well, but I think a lot of stuff makes a lot more sense now, and I think definitely this is a more hopeful direction for the show than I initially thought it was going to be going into this, because going into this, I was honestly like, alright, if they don't give me a great episode, I'm going to leave. I honestly was ready to just quit the show, because I really didn't know if the show was going to give me something great, and it actually did give me something great. But overall, guys, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Like I said, I think this is one of the best episodes we've had so far. I'd love to hear what you think of this episode. What do you think of my complaints? Do you agree that the flashbacks weren't really necessary? What do you think they could have done to make them better? What did you think of the character Luciana? I really do like her character overall. I think she's really going to contribute a lot here. Is she going to be someone to get Nick back on the right path? But that's in my review. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see. And also, one other thing, maybe there's something I'm not seeing about the Nick Walker stuff. Maybe you guys will tell me something I'm not seeing, because, I mean, I get comments that are from people that appear to be a lot smarter than I am, so, if there's something I'm not getting, just let me know. Love to hear your thoughts about that. But I will see you guys in my next, which will be for Stranger Things, which I am definitely finishing Stranger Things tomorrow. I will watch the penultimate episode. I will review it tonight, and then I will review the finale tomorrow and have it done by then. Also, I'm hoping to get out Halt and Catch Fire done with, because I want to review Season 1. And Season 3 literally premieres Tuesday, so I literally have one day to binge Season 2, so I don't really know if I'm going to be able to do that in time for Season 3, but I will definitely get to that. But I want you guys saw this episode, love your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video. I know I said it a million times, but I will see you guys in my next, which will be for Stranger Things, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.